My name is Olivia Bota, and right now I'm about to rock your world with the best sourdough pancakes and waffles you've ever had. I'm so excited to share this recipe, especially if you're new to the world of sourdough and you're just getting your feet wet. This is the way to do it, to start making a very easy recipe that calls for sourdough and some very easy basic ingredients, and you will be blown away by how good and fluffy and soft these pancakes are and how crispy and delicious the waffles are going to be. You're just going to love it. I know it. But let me answer a question you might be having right now. Why add yeast? Why add sourdough starter to pancakes when you could easily just add baking soda, right? And an acid like buttermilk, and have that be the way that you make those pancakes rise. Well, for me, I bake with sourdough starter because I like the health benefits associated with it. Now, I don't have time in this video to go into all of those details, but I do know from lots of research that I've done that a lot of the problems associated with wheat intolerance, gluten intolerance, has to do with the way that wheat gets treated or not treated in the baking process. And fermentation is the process that breaks down a lot of those anti-nutrients that occur in wheat and makes the end product a lot more easy to digest. So that's all I'm going to say about that right now. So just know that I will share with you in another video more details about that. Okay, so let's get started. For this, I'm going to need my scale. I'm going to need a large bowl with a lid. And if you don't have a lid, you can certainly use saran wrap. I have my lid here. You're going to need some kind of whisk. I like this Danish whisk because it allows me to mix my ingredients without over mixing, which is something you're trying to avoid when you're making pancake batter. Okay, now the ingredients we're going to need are going to be, we're going to need some starter. We're going to need 480 grams of starter, 448 grams of buttermilk, 240 grams of whole wheat flour, and 26 grams of honey or maple syrup. So I'm going to measure this out. And today I have my freakishly small spatula. I'm going to use this to pull this out, to pull the starter out. Now, here's where well, actually before I do that, let me show you, there's two paths to this recipe. This recipe calls for 480 grams. I hope I said 480 grams just a second ago, but it does call for 480 grams of starter. Now, that is about 2 cups of starter, give or take, right? You might not have that much starter on hand. I usually only have 200 grams at a time because that's usually what I bake with, is 200 grams. So unless I plan ahead, I might not have that on hand. But let's say that I do plan ahead. And let's say that you want to bake Saturday morning, or that you want to make pancakes for your family or waffles Saturday morning. This recipe means, or requires, that you then start on Friday morning. You would have to feed your starter 250 grams of flour and 250 grams of water Friday morning, so that your starter would be ready on Friday night to make the sponge. Then, when you make the sponge, you let it sit overnight on your counter, and then it's ready to cook up on Saturday morning. Okay, but and sometimes I am that scheduled and that prepared, but sometimes I didn't plan on making pancakes on Saturday morning, and my kids on Friday say, "Mom, can we please have pancakes tomorrow? Or can we please have waffles?" And at that point, I can't go back in time, right, and start that feeding process. So instead, there's a little cheating that you can do, and that is on Friday night. Simply pour out what you have, and path 2 is what I'm going to show you right now. Okay, so like I said, I usually have 200 grams of starter, and we're going to pretend that I didn't plan ahead because my kids asked me on Friday, and that wasn't the original plan. So I'm going to get out 200 grams. And then after I'm done with this, I of course want to feed Eve again. I'll feed her, 100 grams or 110 grams of water and 110 grams of unbleached all-purpose flour. I'll mix that up and then I'll stick her in the fridge. Awesome. Okay, we are good now. Now I'm at 200 grams, but I need 480. I don't want to mess with the quantities of this recipe, so instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract what I have in starter from what I need. So I have 200. 200 taken from 480, or 480 minus 200 equals 280. That's how much starter I would still need. What I'm going to do then is I'm going to break that in half. I'm going to cut that in half to 140 grams of flour and 140 grams of water. That's going to bring me up to 480. Now I know that the sourdough hasn't worked on those 140 grams of flour, but over that night time that it's going to sit on my counter, it'll work on the flour and break it down, and it's going to be perfect. It's going to be just fine. But I will have to do a little tweak to give it a jump start, since there isn't as much starter to work on the flour as if I had started with the 480 grams, okay? So I have 200 right here. I'm gonna add, like I said, an additional 140 grams of water. Perfect. I'm gonna add, now I have pre-measured these, but I just want to show you the process that I follow. So I'm going to add an additional 140 grams of flour, and now I'm up to 480 of the starter. Next, I'm going to add my buttermilk, and this is going to be 448 grams of buttermilk. Now, let's say that you don't have buttermilk on hand when your adorable daughter comes to you and says, "Mom, can we please have pancakes tomorrow?" That's okay. You need not despair or say no to your daughter. You can simply combine 1 tablespoon of fresh lemon juice with 2 cups of milk. I like whole milk, but you can use any milk. Combine that, mix it up really well, let it sit for a few minutes before you add it to this mixture, and you have the equivalent, okay? So 1 tablespoon of lemon juice, 2 cups of water, and you're not gonna believe this, but that gives us, sorry, not water, milk. Correction, right? 1 tablespoon of fresh lemon juice to 2 cups of milk. And that's going to give you about 468 grams of buttermilk. It's a little bit more than the recipe calls for, but it's not a big deal. It's going to be fine. Okay, next, I'm going to add 240 grams of whole wheat flour. Now, I like to make everything, or as much, not everything, I shouldn't say that. I like to make as much as possible using whole grains, whole wheat flour, but if you don't have whole wheat flour, this works just as well with all-purpose flour, okay? And then the last ingredient I'm going to add is 26 grams of honey or maple syrup. Right now I'm going to add the honey, but maple syrup works just as well. And if you don't have either and you want to use sugar, then go ahead and use sugar. It's okay. But I prefer to use honey or maple syrup. Okay, so I'm there. Let's see, I need a little bit more. And you know what? I think I need a little bit more still. Perfect. I'm there. Okay, now I'm going to mix this all up with my Danish whisk. And I'm going to let this sit, I'm going to cover it, and then I'm going to let it sit overnight on my counter. So if I had started with the 480 grams of starter, I would have just left it on my counter, okay? And it would do its thing, and it will be magical tomorrow morning when I show it to you. But because I added less than that, I need to give this a little bit of a push. So I'm going to stick it under the range light that comes with your range. So just put the lid on, put it on top of your stove under the range light, and you'll be exactly where you want to go, where you want to be. Let me tell you though that this is such a forgiving recipe. Oh my goodness, I love the flexibility of this recipe. That it's not an exact science to it. This is really easy. This is really easy to do. So this is mixed. I'm gonna put the lid on. I'm gonna put it on my counter, this one under the range light, and I'll be back here tomorrow to add the rest of the ingredients and bake them, okay? So I'll see you here tomorrow morning.